Have you ever been determined to make something happen? So determined that you would do whatever it takes to make your dream come true? Have you ever wanted something so badly that you would risk everything to make it happen? Well, in the mid-1800s, there were about 4 million slaves living in the United States. Now, slaves, if you remember, they were owned like tables or cows or wagons. Historians believe that between 60 and 100,000 slaves escaped to freedom. Now, they traveled on what became known as the Underground Railroad. Now, the Underground Railroad, of course, we know wasn't a real railroad. It was all the secret ways that slaves made their ways from the south to the north. Now, these fugitives, they hid in carts, they rode on horseback, they walked hundreds of miles through forests and swamps. They crossed raging rivers and ice-bound rivers in the winter. They traveled any way that they could to reach freedom. But Henry had another idea. He was determined to make his dream of freedom come true. Now, this here is a book based on a true story about a man whose name was Henry Brown. Now, in this award-winning book by Ellen Levine called Henry's Freedom Box, we can find out what true determination, what true perseverance really looks like. Let's have a look.
Henry Brown wasn't sure how old he was. Henry was a slave, and slaves weren't allowed to know their birthdays. Henry and his brothers and sisters worked in the big house where the master lived. Henry's master had been good to Henry and his family, but Henry's mother knew things could change. Do you see those leaves blowing in the wind? They're torn from the trees like slave children are torn from their families. And one morning, his mother's worst nightmare came true. They were called to his master's bedroom, where they were told that Henry would be given to the master's son. Henry said goodbye to his family, but as he looked across the field, he saw the leaves swirling in the wind. Henry worked in his new master's factory. He was good at his job, but he was very lonely. He was all alone. Then one day, he met a young lady named Nancy. Nancy and Henry were allowed to get married, and they had a family. And Henry thought that they were so lucky. But Nancy worried. What if our children are sold? Henry couldn't even think of that. Till one day, he heard, "Father, Father, help! They're taking us away!" And sure enough, his children had been sold. Henry no longer sang, he no longer laughed. He tried to think of happy times, but all he could see were the carts carrying away everyone he loved. Then he had an idea. Maybe he could mail himself to freedom. Can Henry mail himself to freedom? Or will he get caught? The only way to find out is to read this book, Henry's Freedom Box.